The all-new for 1971 Cadillac Eldorado had a tough act to follow after the 1967-70 generation. The more tailored look of this generation fell by the wayside, and the new 1971 Eldorado espoused a longer, lower, wider look. This look was in part driven by the fact that the company imposed upon the designers the requirement that the new Eldorado share many more components with the B-platform cars from Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac. This meant that the car grew larger and especially wider than what the designers had hoped. However, despite the requirements imposed upon them, the design team put together an Eldorado with a number of novel styling features, most prominently the beveled look that carried from the hood to the deck lid and across the fenders. This look differentiated the 71 Eldorado from its predecessor as well as other vehicles on the road, and it was a bit challenging to execute in getting it to production. Let's take a listen as former Cadillac design chief Wayne Kady walks around his personal 1972 Eldorado convertible and describes some of the design's unique features as well as the manufacturing challenges associated with putting the car together. All right, so here we are with Wayne looking at his personal 1972 Eldorado, which you've had for some time, right, Wayne?
Yeah, I've had it for quite a few years. I don't know exactly when I got it, but the car was probably about 5-6 years old when I got it.
And your wife encouraged you to buy this, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. It was my first assignment as a chief designer, and she thought maybe I ought to have one. So I didn't argue with her.
Smart. Why argue, right?
Well, why argue? When she's right, don't argue.
Now, this is a 72 model, correct?
This is a 72. The main differences between the 71 and the 72 is the grille, and then the added little molding here, and then the molding above the headlamps.
Okay.
So that, and then the rub strips. The rub strips were added.
Front and rear, correct?
Front and rear, that's correct.
And this grille, the detailing is a bit different than the 70.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than the original grille. The original grille was more vertically oriented, and it was, if I remember right, the blades were angled a little bit from the center out.
Mm-hmm.
And this one here is more symmetrical. And the main difference is it's got the scalloped horizontals, and then the verticals are a lot more detailed.
Was that just for a styling change?
It was a styling change, and I don't think it hurt the look of the car. In fact, it might have enhanced the look of the car a little bit.
What was the thought of adding these moldings, just to enhance the look as well?
To get a difference would be my guess. You know,
Okay.
a model difference.
This car, you were talking about in the 67 Eldorado, how it had that complicated two-piece hood.
That's correct. On the 67 Eldorado, it was a two-piece hood. And then I believe there was a depression that contained the molding. And the depression was to camouflage the weld. And the front part of the hood and a little portion of the back of the hood were metal finished. And what that comprises of is a solder joint, and then they spread solder on it, and then they file it. And that, at the time, I was told, was about $1 an inch. So $1 an inch, I think there's about 9 inches. So that's a lot of expense. Now, there are a lot of people that used to say, well, only Cadillac can afford that kind of thing. But I think a lot of other cars way back in the 40s, 50s used a lot of that lead. And of course, lead got to be a bad thing for the environment and person's health. So they went away from that. So this hood is all one piece. And that's because we had well, I was fortunate enough to work with a die engineer from Cadillac. And let me back up a little bit. It used to be that Fisher Body was responsible for the body from the front door cut rearward.
Separate GM division basically did from the windshield back, and then the divisional team did from the windshield forward.
That's correct. And the die engineer at Cadillac's name was Wally Satarsky. And he was a designer's dream engineer because he would accept a challenge like no engineer I ever met or had to work with in my career. Wally would he would bust his rear end to try and give you whatever you wanted. Especially if you liked the design, he would do everything he could. I remember when Wally came in to look at this hood, I had to call him in because my deadlines were coming up, and I thought I better make sure that Wally can make this hood, because if I have to make a change, then that's going to affect what I'm doing on the rear. So I knew I had to deal with the Fisher body, and they were a lot more conservative than Wally was. So when Wally came in, Wally used to smoke a lot. Of course, everybody smoked in those days, whether you bought cigarettes for yourself or not. You just, it's just an environment where everybody smoked. But I'd get a big ashtray and I'd sit Wally down in a nice, comfortable chair, and he liked coffee, so I'd always have a pot of coffee. And I'd just let him look at the car and study it. He'd take a scale and lay it across the hood. He'd measure. He'd take a piece of paper and he'd lay it on there, and he'd fold it down to see how it would work, and then he would write down a few notes, and he'd never say much. And I'd say, Wally, if I need to change this, now's the time to tell me. And he said, well, I don't know if I can make it yet, but don't change anything. And so I went along with that, and then several weeks later I called him up. I said, I'm getting very close to the deadline. And he says, well, let me show you what I have. And somehow or another, he got the information for the surface, and then they pressed a hood out of over a Kirkside die. I think it was Kirkside at the time. And it was this whole hood, it was one piece. I said, Wally, how did you do that? He said, my biggest problem was that I had to find a blank size that big. And they have blank sizes that are pretty big for a rough panel, but for the hood, you've got a lot more width because it's got a lot more contour, and then because of the, if you were to take the hood and then raise it up the surface, then it would be wider than the top would be. But
because of all the tumble home.
Right. So I said, okay, Wally, that's great. Now how am I going to make the deck lid? Because the deck lid is as complex as the hood. And I know Fisher body is a lot more conservative, and they're going to tell me they can't make it. So I really need for you to come over, if you will, and explain to me how you would make it, so I'd at least have some kind of an idea as to what to say when they're telling me they can't do it.
And that's because the deck lid has all those beveled surface?
The deck lid's got a beveled surface, and it's got a lot of plan view change. And this area right in here is pretty complex. So anyway, I got Wally to come over, and Wally looked at it for a little while, and he studied it. He says, well, the way I would make it is that I would use a binder, and I'd hit it at about a 45-degree angle. And he says, they're going to tell you they can't make it, but that's how I would make it. And I says, okay, thanks, Wally. And sure enough, several weeks later, when it was time for Fisher Body to come over and look at what we were doing, they told me that they couldn't make it. They were lined up maybe 6, 7 deep, and I was standing next to Carl Hedin. Carl Hedin was I think he was the vice president of Fisher Body at the time. He was the top guy. And of course, the first guy's kneeling down, he's looking at it, and he's shaking his head, and the next guy is looking at him and shaking his head. And the third guy is standing there, with an odd look on his face. So when I said they couldn't make it, I told Carl, I said, what if they used a binder and hit it at about a 45-degree angle? I told him exactly what Wally had told me. And Carl looked at me like, how in the hell would you know it? You're a designer. And then he looked at the guy up front and says, yeah, what if you use a binder? And then then I never heard any more about it, and then they did make it. So that's kind of the story of the hood and the deck lid, and I thought that might be kind of interesting. Maybe another interesting point is that when we release the surface, we release the surface to the inside of metal. And then I had forgotten about that, and when you release the inside of metal, if you want definition, then you may be surprised when it got into production because of the radii from the inside of the surface to the outside of the surface.
Oh, so you release the inside of...
Inside of surface, yeah.
Really?
Yes. So when I was called to go over and look at the wood die model for the hood, there was a crease line. This crease line was very soft. No, well, this crease line here hardly read at all. And it reads here, but because it's a white car, it's not, you don't see it as well in this light. But what we'd do is we would take wax that was the thickness of metal, and it's sheet wax, and we'd lay it on the surface. And then we put a material called Dynoc, and Dynoc is like a film that you can paint.
A sticky film that they
it's
put?
Like sticky film, but it's pliable enough that you can lay it on the surface and stretch it and form it, and it'll look just like paint film. So we take like black Dynoc, put it on the surface, and then the guy would work it, with the file until he got to a point where I was satisfied, and then that was it. So that's an interesting little detail.
Interesting. So wax, and then they
wax.
file the wax and then put Dynoc?
No, they don't file the wax. They put the wax on over the surface that they'd filed.
Oh, okay.
Till you get the definition you're looking for.
Okay. Interesting. And now, it obviously has the bevel here.
Yes.
What was the thought behind, did you ever think about doing more definitive creases, or you just wanted to have that? I
just wanted to have enough surface there.
Like a reed, but not as
strong. So it'd read through, yes.
Interesting.
You don't want it to fade before it gets to the end, especially on a light colored car.
And I see this car, you have the lamp monitors too, and the fender.
There's a turn indicator, and then there's a high beam indicator. And I think the other indicator is just to let you know your lights are on.
Yeah,
lights.
kind of like a turn indicator, low, high beam or something.
Right.
And it has not cloisonne, but that it's
well, we used to have cloisonne emblems on Cadillacs, and then it got to a point where cloisonne quality wasn't as great as it should be, and it was very costly. And when they make cloisonne emblems, they fill all these little pockets, like you got gold here where the merlets are, and then you got the red and the blue and the white. Okay, they carefully fill that with ground glass, and then they heat it. And then what was happening, it wasn't really smooth, and then when they grind it off, sometimes they grind some of the detail. It just wasn't, and it was very costly. And I guess when you get into the volume that we were looking at, they decided to look at something else. And then there was a vendor that came to visit. The name of the vendor was D.L. Ald, and the salesperson showed me a sample of what they were doing. And it wasn't a Cadillac emblem, it was somebody else's emblem. And they were doing a lot of Ford ovals back at the time. And he showed me the quality and explained to me how they do it, and then he invited me to come visit the plant, so I did. And they made up a few samples for us, and when I showed it to Cadillac, they were very happy with it, and it was a lot less expensive, and the uniformity was very desirable.
For those who may have missed it, Wayne used the technically correct term for, these aren't ducks in here, it's merlets.
Merlets, yeah.
Yes, feetless birds, I think.
And these are the pearls. One wheel cover is really a carryover from the 70. I don't know whether it was because of cost or because not enough time to develop it, but this was a design that was originally stated for the 71. And sorry about the dirty tire.
Oh, I'm sure the viewers are going to
Yeah,
impugn your credibility there for the dirty tire.
So that's pretty much it. You know, at one time, this is a convertible. At one time, my assistant Don Logerquist had done a full-size rendering of a four-door convertible with a second cowl.
Wow. Okay. That would have been wild.
Yeah, well, and I don't remember whether it was a suicide rear door like the Lincoln or how that was, but it was just a concept. And we also looked at a station wagon version. And the interesting part about the station wagon version was that instead of a tailgate that would drop down, we had it like a drawer, and the drawer would pull out, and then it had a feature on both sides that would open out, like if you wanted a camping stove.
Oh.
For instance, if you wanted to use it for a tailgate party, then it had those neat features.
That's interesting. Wow.
And it also had, we were looking at caning. And it was just a real fine caning, and it was in the, I think we had it along the belt here, just a strip of it along the station wagon.
Was it a clay model or what?
It was a clay model, yeah. It never went any further than that.
Okay.
But it was an interesting concept.
What was the thought behind this feature here?
Originally, when we started out sketching, we were looking at designs that had 4 separate fenders, or the impression of 4 separate fenders. And as the car got wider, then there's just no way you can do that. So when we started out, we were starting out with a body that was about the same width as the E-body that this replaced, you know, the 67 through 70 version.
Sure.
But that went away, and I don't know whether it was because of volume or plat availability, or, you know, there's a lot of things involved. So as the car grew wider, then of course that went away. But we still had the this bevel feature that comes to a point, and then we had another bevel feature come to a point. And if you can imagine, you know, the ending of them as being one.
I see.
One element of the design, and then here you've got the same thing happening, and then you have to end it. And this is another element of the design, but they're really compatible. And this allows you to give you some of the Cadillac heritage as well. So the Cadillacs in the 1950 came out with that first, and maybe the 49 Fleetwood had a little grill there too at the lead end of the.
I think they even had that into the early 50s too for a while.
Yes, they did.
So that was, I guess, kind of helped you keep the 4-fender theme, but you couldn't make the cars wide to do the 4, because it was already wide to begin with.
Exactly.
Interesting. So that was kind of a compromise in keeping
It is, but I mean, you know, people may think that's kind of corny, but maybe it's a good thing that the car got wide so we didn't have the separate fenders. Then the car would have really been dated.
This still has, by the way, you mentioned in the 67 video, this still has the high back seats too, with the
It does.
the tall headrest
Right.
that Cadillac had for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some lamp monitors too, even back there, that you can see in your rear view mirror.
That's right. Those are, there's a, I'm trying to remember, there's a wire that goes to them. It's not electrical wire, it's
Fiber optic?
fiber optic, yeah. And the same thing with the
front ones
with
here.
the front monitors too. Another feature here is a little
Oh, the outside temperature thermometer?
outside temperature. It's never accurate, but
Well, when you're driving a Cadillac, whatever it says is correct, right? Yeah. Now this interior, this was Don Roper's interior, who was one of your teammates from the...
Yeah, Don Roper worked on the '67 Cadillacs, and then they transferred the interiors, and he ended up being the chief designer for this car interior. Very talented guy.
Interesting. And back then there wasn't, were they kind of designed separately, the interior and the exterior?
Yes, they were. And I don't know how they're doing it today, but the whole time that I was at GM working, the interior studio is always separate from the exterior studio.
And this was the first kind of scissor top for GM that
It
folded in on itself.
It was.
So you get the bigger width in the back seat there.
That's right. That way you get the full width rear seat. You can still store the top. Otherwise, if this bow had to stack, then if you take this in plan view, then you'd have to have a
jog or something.
A well for it to go into. So that would interfere with the width of the seat. Now, the interesting part about the top, when I first saw the top, it was on a '65 Cadillac, and there was an engineer at design whose name was Ed Fadolin. And Ed was really, he was a very creative engineer. Like if you wanted a special hinge for something, he would come up with 3 or 4 different solutions. He was just really prolific with engineering ideas. But the top that he had developed was a symmetrical version. And this one ended up being an asymmetrical version. And I never understood why, because when this top is going down, it has a yaw to it and one side dips. And then I, many years later, had a friend that had a Chrysler, I don't know, early 30s Chrysler 4-door convertible. And he was putting the top down, and that had a symmetrical top, so I wonder if that might have had something to do with why this one is asymmetrical.
Oh, infringement or something?
Yeah. I mean, that's my take on it. Maybe not be right.
Interesting. And this also has the 500 by now, but
it does.
detuned.
It's detuned, yes.
Doesn't have enough scoot for you there.
You got too old to be a race driver. This top was shared with all the GM B bodies. Chevrolet had the same top.
Well, you had to share the top.
Well, yeah, the top, the mechanism, the windshield, all that's a B body.
And this is a real glass.
This is
rear.
glass, yes, and this was an option to have the heated backlight.
And this is the rub strip that got added on the...
That's the rub strip that got added, so that probably added another inch to the length of the car.
Yeah, this trunk is amazing. It's hard to, I think, capture all the different surfaces, but you
Right.
can certainly get the bevel theme, and then this was, like you said, this was probably a very hard area back there.
Well, trying to make the whole thing unique too. You know, you've got a hood in the front, and I'm trying to get the shape in the rear to mimic what's happening up in the front, and then making it look unique.
Anything that you weren't able to get on this design that you really wanted that didn't make it through?
Not that I can recall. I mean, it's been a while.
So the finance guys didn't twist your arm too hard?
Well, I don't remember worrying about that back then.
You probably ruled with an iron fist or something. That's what
No, I didn't. It's just that I think if there are so many parts that were common between all the other divisions, so there might have been more money to spend to make it more unique. If you if you look at the top here, it's shared with all the B bodies.
Right.
Look at the windshield, shared with all the B bodies. The cowl, and probably part of the chassis. The drivetrain is carryover.
Right.
So the sheet metal is really the biggest change you can get. And if you have to make it unique and different, then everything has a value to it. So, what's the value of a unique rear end, for instance? And to make a Chevrolet into a Cadillac.
Yeah, because you had so many common parts. You had the economies of scale
Right.
in most of the places. So
Well, you had Chevrolet, and then you had Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, and then Cadillac. So they're starting out all with the same body. I shouldn't say the same body because the doors were unique. But the cowl, the same platform.
sure, suspension design. Although I can't remember on the Eldorado, this is a torsion bar front coil rear by now, as opposed to the single leaf rear. I think this is the coil springs with the airlift shocks.
Yeah, it's got airlift shocks, right?
Right. I love the 8.2 liter.
Oh yeah.
Spelled in a European fashion here too, as opposed to the typical LITER. Thanks so much for sharing your personal 72 Eldorado with us.
Well, I'm happy to do that, Adam. It's really nice talking to you.
Same way. Until next time, we'll have to talk about another car.
All right, I'd love to.
Thanks for watching this video walk around of Wayne Kady's personal 1972 Eldorado. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as that helps the YouTube algorithm serve it up to more viewers like you. And if you really enjoyed it, feel free to hit the super thanks button, which is the heart-shaped icon with the $sign at the bottom right of your video viewer. Until next time, be sure to check out some video thumbnails at bottom left and right for some suggestions for you. And be sure to subscribe by clicking the circular icon of the 67 Buick Riviera at the top left. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, take care.